If I know Rolf, everything he does is 100% on the ball, and what he's done is he's more or less put together a presentation about 20 years of Craiceann and the influence it's had on the whole bodhrán world, and we're lucky to have the likes of him be so well organised. Take it away.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, wait now.
Oh, fuck off. We'll have that later.
I was going to show you the bodhrán melody later, but anyway.
There will be a point where there's a good idea to bring it up. Right, so Michal asked me to do a little presentation, and here's the plan. We'll have a quick look at the early history of the bodhrán, and it will be very quick. And then we look into the last 20 years and focus on playing, teaching, and making. And then I try to give an outlook on the future of the bodhrán, which is probably difficult. At Craiceann we had 3 talks about the history of the bodhrán. Mel Mercia on the very first Craiceann in 2001, myself in 2005, and then Liam O'Barron in 2008. Liam presented the result of his research that he did and published in the Tra magazine, which is a 3-part article which is really worth reading, and I have only bits and pieces from that in here because we focus on the last 20 years. The word itself, bodhrán, can be traced back, written at least to 1600, possibly earlier. There's a medical text, and the text talks about the belly being under tension like a drum, and instead of drum there is bodhrán being used. This is, Michal can probably read it, I can't really, but I know for sure that this is bodhrán. So the word bodhrán was used to resemble a drum. That's the earliest trace of that. And then of course there is a couple of paintings that show people holding a frame drum. This one is a very famous one by MacLeese in the mid 1850 probably, and you can see this little guy here. He holds a drum. It's a frame drum, it has jingles, so it's a bit like a bodhrán. It's probably not what we think of as a bodhrán now. There's a few more things, but that's just 2 slides for the early history, and then we look at the 20th century, which is obviously not only closer to us and therefore easier to research, but also there is more documentation and there is audio files and all that. So in the 20th century, the bodhrán had 2 major roles, one as a ritual instrument and one as a musical instrument. Now the ritual instrument was restricted to around the Wren Day, St. Stephen's Day, around Christmas, where people would go out hunting the wren, and there's an old picture here shown to frame drums, bodhráns. But for a long time it was thought that this was the only use in the early 20th century, but research from Liam showed that there was more. There is a well-known audio file or audio documentation. The first recordings were made in the 20s, mainly in the States, and it sounded like this. So we don't know anything about the instrument that we hear. We don't know what it looked like. We can only guess it looked like a frame drum, like a bodhrán, or maybe even a tambourine. All we have is that. But we have also written evidence of early bodhrán playing. There's a book by Willie Reynolds called Memories of a Music Maker, and he was around in the 30s and 40s, and the book has that quote in it that talks about all the musicians playing, and then there's the sentence, and a couple of bodhrán players. So there were sessions in the 40s that had bodhrán players. Don't step on the dog. And there's a couple of bodhrán players mentioned in the book. Now all these names don't ring a bell with me, to be honest, apart from one, Davy Fallon. Who knows who Davy Fallon was?
He played with the chieftain.
Yeah, but you would know, but I was talking to Stuart. Christ's sake. Of course, Michal was right. Davy Fallon was the first bodhrán players with the chieftains. So he's mentioned in that book. So there was bodhrán playing. There were sessions that had bodhrán players in the 40s. And then, of course, later in the 20th century, things exploded. Aran Islands brings the bodhrán to the stage, says the bodhrán is the national drum. The chieftains get David Fallon when they developed or when they started. And by that time, he was a well-known bodhrán player. And that was, we're talking 65 here, he was in his 70s. So if he was a well-known bodhrán player and 70 years or even more, he must have been playing for a good bit, and that makes sense because he's mentioned in a book that refers to 25 years before that. He leaves the band soon after for retirement reasons or for reasons of age, and he followed, of course, by Peter Mercier, and then later on Kevin Conneff. So these were the first people that brought it to a stage, and then the folk revival came in. Irish music got more interested and getting more popular. We got more recordings. We had studio recordings of the bodhrán. We had bands like the Bossy Band and Planksty, Stockton Wings, the Dan and Chieftains, just to name a few. And if you look carefully, this person here was standing where I am standing now yesterday, Stoneland. And this was the first time individual styles would develop. You could hear a difference between a couple of players that we will look into now. There were many key players, and of course, the most important sentence is this, and many more, but just a few names that you should have heard. And I marked the ones that were at Craiceann over the last 20 years. And you can see that we were lucky enough to have most of them on the island, either as teachers or giving workshops or playing concerts, whatever. They were with us in the last 20 years. Now, don't want to single out too many, but just one or two, just to hear the different style. Of course, everybody is referring to Johnny McDonough and his very, very... And you will see his left hand moving, and he was probably, that's what they say, and we don't know for sure, but he was one of the first ones to do that, to bring the left hand in to change pitch. And then I was talking about individual styles. Another example is Tommy Hayes, who was here the first year as well, who played the Stockton Wings. There's a recording from '78. He has a very colorful style, his own way of stroking and his own way of sticking, and he's also using a lot of audio technology in the studio, which we won't hear because we don't have a stereo setup, but still I give you a little example. You can always tell.
There was a pretty maiden, she was going to a ball, she saw a giant.
You can always tell that's Tommy Hayes, and it's completely different to what Johnny was doing. So that's the individual styles I was talking about. So in the 20th century, in the early days, the drums had jingles sometimes, so they were removed. The skin hand was introduced, and we got a cleaner sound. That's basically what it comes down to. Making bodhrán makers. Yeah, there were bodhrán makers in 1920, and this is one of them. James Sonny Davy built bodhráns for tourists and for musicians. He had a thriving business, and the instruments were in high demand. So in the 20s, not only for ritual reasons, people were buying bodhrans. They were buying souvenirs, just like they do sometimes now, and most of us probably have started on a souvenir bodhran. And but he was also in demand for musicians that wanted to have a proper bodhran. Other early makers include Ted Fury, and here's a drum, probably one of the first tunable ones, thanks to Joe Fortune. He gave us the pictures here. A very old drum, also from the 60s. And of course there's Charlie Byrne, a very famous earlier maker, and then there's Seamus O'Kane, and that's the first drum he made with an internal tuning system. So the tuning system came in. Other people like Dave Gormley from Scotland, it's Tommy here again playing one of the Dave Gormley drums, are people that then started to develop their own way of making them and making them better. Towards the end of the 20th century, there was a higher demand, and we got all of a sudden makers outside Ireland and the UK started to come up. Norbert Eckermann started to make bodhrans in Austria. Craiceann only came in this century. There were others. Brendan White was popular around the turn of the century in the 90s. And this is what drums looked like 2001. You can spot a few faces that you probably remember. There's David there on the, see, where's the laser pointer? There you go. David Lewis, Joe, I know this face, Mick here, and you probably recognize this guy here as well. That was 2001, and lots of Brendan White drums, no tape, nothing. That's Germany, 2002, when we started our workshops. Again, no tape. Hido has here a couple of times, and I look a bit younger there as well. So that was that. That's what they looked like in the turn of the century. Now, next step, teaching. What was the situation like 20 years ago when before Craiceann started and before we started in Germany and others started? We don't know really. There were private lessons, I guess. There were only very few summer schools with bodhran classes. Very, very few. Hardly any workshops. I'm not talking Germany, there were no workshops at all, but even over here. Obviously no online resources at that stage. But we had some books. That's the book I got started with. And you can see by the reaction, a lot of people had that book. I bought it with a cassette. Now you can get it with a DVD, with a CD. And then there's Micheál O'Sullivan's book. That is a very interesting read historically. But that's about it. I'm missing probably a few, but it was not a lot. And unfortunately, only have this picture here. In 1996, I read an article by Tommy Hayes saying they should be taken seriously. And it was published in the Irish Music Magazine. I contacted the Irish Music Magazine. They can't find the article. Tommy doesn't have it. I contacted Tommy as well. So I used to have it. I don't know where mine is. It was a very interesting read, because what he was saying was, right, face it, they come into your sessions, they come into your festivals, they play in the bodhran, and if you don't teach them how to do it, and what proper session etiquette is and how things work, we can't complain if they don't play properly. So instead of just complaining about it and being angry at them and kicking them out of sessions and hanging up signs saying no bodhrans allowed or whatever, you're laughing. If there's pubs, Micheál knows it, there's bars, Fecal, for example, has a sign up, no bodhran place. Anyway, so they should be taken seriously, they should have a chance to learn. There should be learning opportunities. The summer schools that were all over Ireland for other musical instruments, melody instruments, they should also teach bodhran. That was his article. I remember reading it and thinking, yeah, he has a point, he's totally right. So we're looking into now the last 20 years, and again we focus on the playing, the making, and the teaching. The last 20 years, an explosion happened. Irish music got more and more popular. River dance played a vital part. A lot of touring musicians. We also have university courses for traditional Irish music in a couple of universities in Ireland. And ever since is influenced by other styles, by other drums. Players took influences from soul music, from blues, from hip hop, from other musical styles, using a high tonal range and the full spectrum of the drums, sliding sounds, drum kit sounds. And other percussion was introduced into Irish music. There were bands that didn't have a bodhrán, but they had tabla, an Indian drum, other drum kits. And arrangements with bodhráns outside Irish trad started to happen as well. Martin O'Neill, one of the tutors here over the years, was touring with Stevie Wonder. So there you go. We got new techniques. Single-ended technique, single-ended rolls and triplets. The wrist got straightened out. If you look at the players now, it's mainly a straight wrist. And if you look 20, 25, 30 years ago, they have more bent wrists. We use the full tonal, I said that already. We have another, instead of just going down, up, there's another beat coming in. Tap, down, up, in, down, up, tap, down, up. That wasn't right there 30 years ago. Sliding sounds with hand movements, low tones and drum kit sounds. So we have flowing, driving rhythms, but also interrupted by syncopated rhythms. And we got a huge stream of new players. And they come from two sides, not only from the Irish trad side, also people that were percussionists all of a sudden discovered the bodhrán, and they have a completely different approach to the whole thing. Because they're not flute players that also pick up the bodhrán. They are percussion players that discover the bodhrán as a very versatile, a very interesting instrument. So they come up with different backgrounds and different challenges, because context is always important. Is it played in Irish trad? Is it played in a session? Is it a band environment? We look into that. So what happened was, bam, bam, bam. Players came up, not only 2 or 3 famous players, but, and this is obviously not a full collection, if you do a bodhrán player Google search, it's the result. Just pictures of bodhrán players on stage, people that we know, people that we've seen before, people that are here in the room, people that we don't know that haven't been here. Dave Boyd is a percussionist, Craig Baxter, a Scottish player, a young guy, Brian Morrissey, one of the people that we're trying to get for years. So this list, of course, is not complete. And again, I made this list and marked the ones that are have been here. And again, loads of stars. And of course, there is a longer list of that. Don't get me wrong. These were coming from the, sorry, I'm moving back here, more from the trad scene, but they were influenced obviously by percussion training, drum kits, and other musical styles. But they were originally probably from the trad scene. Whereas there is other people that have studied drums, drum kit, percussion, like Cormac Martin and Dave Boyd. And then there's people that come from the percussion side, as I mentioned before. Matthew Bell is one of them in the States. Andy, is he here? He's not, bastard. Andy is originally a percussion instructor that picked up the bodhrán.
I'm watching the TV back here.
All right, okay.
Good save, Andy.
That was good. And of course, Stevie, who makes the tipper, Stevie Moises. He's a brilliant drummer and also a brilliant bodhrán player who plays in a Bavarian rock band and plays bodhrán. So he is originally a drummer that fell in love with the bodhrán and then started to play and making tippers. And again, there is many, many more. And some of you are here because you're probably a percussionist that learned about the bodhrán and wants to expand their repertoire. And a lot of us are here because we like Irish music, we like the whole idea that's behind that. So the bodhrán became a percussion instrument. Simple as that. It's not only in Irish trad, but in many other genres you can find now bodhrán players. The tonal component became more important. And also what's very important, we have many, many more opportunities to play. We're not restricted to Irish music and you don't have to play it in a session. It's good if you do, but it's not necessary. We have a great diversity in styles and a wide range of styles, and that's a good thing. Very important is the context where the bodhrán is played, and we'll have examples of that later, because musicality, if it's a session or if it's a stage, if it's a song or a tune, you want to always match the situation, the music, and always be in time. But even now and today, people that were playing in the last century are still around, and they still play a vital role in trad. It's not that it's all new, but the ones like this one here that have been there for years and years, for decades, like, where is it? Colin Murphy. That's still as valid as any other modern stuff. And everybody that is a professional player knows that. Here is this guy, Dronjo, playing with fluke, and it sounds like this. Same guy, different setting. The clip is over 2 minutes, and I don't want to bore you with 2 minutes, but we'll jump towards the end. Still playing the same rhythm, and he plays it all the way through. It's the same guy that in the video before was going all over the skin, slides and plops and high notes and low notes and bamboo palm. It's very important to remember the context you're in. What he was doing with fluke wouldn't work with Kirsten here. It wouldn't, but it worked. He's able to do both, and that's something you should all aim for. You know, the fancy stuff has its place, but not everywhere. Making. In the last 20 years, all the makers were faced with new challenges because there were higher demands. We were on stage, the drum was reacting to influences. We had different climate zones. People all over the world started to play the bodhrán, and every now and then I get an email in my little shop saying, I'm in, wherever, and it's very dry. Which of the drums would work best? So there is, because we're not always in a wet situation like you're mostly in Ireland, there's different climate zones. And then there are specific sound ideals for different players. Some people like more overtones, some people like less overtones, some people want a very specific sound in that direction or in another direction. Just like Donald was here last night, what he wanted for his playing is completely different to what other players want for their playing. So the result, again, here also is a greater diversity in drums and tippers, and new opportunities offered by the makers of drums and tippers to the professional players and to the other players as well. The drums started to change in size. They are very professionally constructed most of the times now. The tippers come in high quality, And it's not only a wooden tipper. I remember when I started 30 years ago, I would go into a music shop in Ireland and say, do you have any bodhrán tippers? And the guy looked at me and yeah, maybe. Walked back, cardboard box came out on the counter, and there was rough wood in it. And you would select one or two and it'd take home. And now it's a completely different story. You go to Stevie and there are other makers as well on the net that offer a great selection of hot rods. They came in the last 20 years, brushes, effect tippers, different grips, different ways to hold the tipper. So also the manufacturing of bodhráns and tippers shifted from mainly hobbyists to professionals. Now we have professional bodhrán and tipper makers, people that make a living from that. We have large percussion companies like Meindl and Schlagwerk producing bodhráns. We use new materials, as we have seen yesterday, and the lucky winner of the drum has new materials in it. And then there are signature lines, which are drums made according to the sound of professional bodhrán players. Some of our teachers here have, that was Craiceann or with Rolf Wagels, making drums specifically to their sound, ideal sounds. That applies to bodhrán and tippers. Some tipper makers provide specially made tippers as signature lines as well. The result is the most important one, and we have better instruments. Simple as that. We have professional instruments. We have a great improvement in construction, skins, tuning systems, bearing edge. We know more about how the drum sound is influenced by all these elements, and that all happened in the last 20 years. So we've come from here to here. You see the difference, not only in the colors. You see, it's more colorful for a start, but the sizes have changed. Slightly wider drums mainly. A lot of tape. Tape has been popular to reduce the overtones. And so this is a couple of years ago here, again at Craiceann. So Craiceann itself played a role because it was always that in the workshops we had product launches at Craiceann. We also presented, trying to present interesting results of a university project here. This is one I did with Craiceann a couple of years ago. We went to University of Munich and got it sound tested. You can see the drum here. It's been hit by a specific tipper with a specific weight, so it's always the same. And then we did all the sound testing, and we could change the skin and we could change the bearing edges and see how this is influenced. So we were presenting the results here. Here's Craiceann preaching. And here's myself using the Craiceann laser pointer. And we did frequency spectrum analyzers and all that, and that was shown here. And here's Cormac presenting one of the first, 20 years, one of the first synthetic.
I don't think he's changed.
Who said that?
We all, but every time you see Cormac, he looks the same, isn't it?
I want 10 of what he's having.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one of the first synthetic headed drums that was presented here. And then, of course, yesterday we talked a bit about the bodhrán. And then the signature lines of Eamon Murray and also Cormac and Martin Neal were usually launched at Craiceann. So Craiceann played a vital role in that. It gave a platform where those new things could be presented. And the maker stalls were always a point of fruitful collaborations and discussions leading to new projects and new tippers being designed. And there's a big discussion going on in between David and Stevie about tipper length or whatever it is. And we also had controversial discussions about things that came up. Who remembers the Melody Mate?
Did you have to bring that up?
Well, since you brought it out. The first couple of years we were tortured with that thing by Mihal. It's a hand replacement, and you move it up and down, and you get all the different tones. I just learned today he got $5,000 for it, a grant of 5,000 to develop that. I wonder what he did with the last 4,000 Anyway, teaching. The last 20 years saw increased teaching opportunities, and of course the first thing to mention if you talk about 20 years is us. Craiceann is started in 2001. I got an email from Brendan White in 2000 saying there's something going on the Aran Islands you should check out. That's something for you. Brendan is a good friend, and he was nice enough to point me in that direction. So I came here. This is the teachers that were here in 2001, and in the last 20 years, of course, there were more workshops coming up. Junior, Davey had his stuff in Craiceann, and of course, Colin and Robbie with Woola Bus and Robbie with his bodhrán bus were influential as well. And there's obviously more chance to get private lessons, easier to find a teacher, even if you're not in Ireland. There are now bodhrán classes in summer schools in Ireland and in the States, and Tommy is very happy about that. We have workshops all over Europe and all around the world in the end. You can get bodhrán workshops. And of course then we have online courses now. There was a time when you could buy a DVD, so people could buy a DVD and show you what happened. Eamon Murray did one, Guido in Germany did one. And there's YouTube. It would have been great to have YouTube when I started, because I had to walk into concerts and look what the bodhrán player was doing to understand or get an understanding what was going on. Nowadays you go to YouTube, type in bodhrán, and you get thousands of videos. Social media, and of course even more than before, festival and tours where you can learn. Now we at Craiceann, we always try to address the wide range that the bodhrán has, and we brought in teachers that were probably not on the traditional side with Cormac and Martin, just to name one. We're trying to keep a balance though, because we try to cover all sides, but we have a strong emphasis on the tradition, because that's in my heart and it's Mihal's heart, and I think everybody who is involved in the organization is more on the traditional side. That doesn't mean we dismiss anything. You can learn world rhythms with Cormac here at Craiceann, so that says it all. We're trying to provide the best learning experience, and we introduced the master class at some point. It's not this year, but we had realized that there's even higher standards now that need to be addressed, so we had the master class for a couple of years. And also the workshops, the spots that we are in now, had very broad subjects sometimes. History, of course. We also had meditation here. We still have meditation class with Jan. It's also another broader aspect. We talked about classical music. And of course, the student body got more and more international, because we could spread the news that there's something going on. We had people from Russia, we had people from Australia, all over Europe, Asia, of course. And of course, America and Australia, so all around the world basically. And then there's one thing that always I liked about Craiceann, because I was affected as well. We had former students that became teachers. You know this guy? A very young Eamon Murray, after winning the All Ireland in 2001. And then we had some of the people that come regularly with Stefan O'Brien. Myself changed from the student seat to the teacher seat as well, and Amy, of course, and Andy. And then we had students doing the workshop with Alan Collinson, some people remember him, Rob Lee, who played with the BBC Symphony Orchestra, was talking about classical music and the bodhrán. There's classical pieces that incorporated the bodhrán, and Rob was sent out by the BBC to Craiceann to learn to play the bodhrán. He was the main percussionist in that. And then Andy and myself. So that was always part of Craiceann as well. So, to summarize, we have better drums, we have great playing, and a lot more quality teaching. Through that, we have a better acceptance. The drums are easier to play if you buy a halfway decent drum, and you're not a good or not an experienced player, the sound you will get is many, many times better than the sound you would have gotten 20 years ago. And through that, we have a general better acceptance of bodhrán playing in sessions and in the music. So what Tommy Hayes had as a vision became reality. Not only through Craiceann, but also through Craiceann. Nowadays is the ideal environment for the beginners. It's ideal. You have all the online resources. We have people here that take lessons with Andy Crusper in the States, but they live in Ireland or wherever. So worldwide, you can have lessons. You can go to many workshops, and the interest therefore continues to rise worldwide. Again, both from Irish music enthusiasts, but also from percussionists of all genres. So that's what we achieved altogether in 20 years. Now, what will come? I have no idea. There's a German saying, predictions are difficult, especially when they refer to the future. And that's true. But here are mine, and maybe in 20 years' time we'll bring out that slide again and see where I was right and where I was wrong. Creativity knows no boundaries, so the diversity will be on the rise, and there will be many, many other ideas by other players that will push the bodhrán even further. And we'll have both. We'll have virtuosity, but also back to the roots. There's younger players that are less, let's call it expressive, than the younger players 10 years ago. So I see a tendency, even in the very young shots, that it's less plops and less bang, boom, bam, but more relaxed. We will definitely see the bodhrán in other musical areas, and we'll definitely learn about bodhrán and tech. Andy is doing a workshop there this afternoon in here in the theater, where he uses all kind of technical stuff to sample the bodhrán and do something. And I'm pretty sure we'll see more of that. We'll probably see an e-bodhrán at some stage. We did a bit. Yeah, there's the cork wave drum is a frame drum, an E-frame drum, and Dave Boyd was experimenting with it as a bodhrán. So if you Google Dave Boyd, he already has started doing that. In the production, I think we'll see a surge of synthetic skins. I think that's one of the main things that we'll see in the next couple of years more and more, because we now know how we can make them sound properly. There was a time when you had synthetic skinned bodhráns and they really didn't sound too well, because we didn't know how to handle the synthetic skin. As you can see now in the ruffle drum and in other drums, there is a place for the synthetic skin. It's not replacing, I'm not saying it's replacing the natural skin, but there will be more of that. And then I was speaking to Craiceann. I said, what do you think? What is the next 20 years? What will the future bring? And he said, yeah, there will be refining and further details that we probably won't see, because they're inside the drum and it's smaller changes. And I agree. I think it won't be as much as in the last 20 years. That's my prediction for the future. Just like with, say, smartphones. When they came out, the first couple of years, the smartphone came out, it was exploding and all the new things. And now if there's a new iPhone, you really have to look into the details to see what defines that new iPhone compared to the generation before. And I think that's the tendency with all technical things. Things are very defined by now. So there will be more of that and more details, and we will talk about tuning frames and all that, but I think it will be less. Teaching, hybrid teaching environment. Robbie and Colm did it in the last Bullabas. They were able to send out the signal to the world, but there were also students in the room. So that's probably one thing we're going to see. And I see a tendency that the bodhrán is used, not only used, but also taught outside Irish trad in completely different fields. Healing, I think Amy is doing quite a bit in that bit. And then Robbie is doing team and community building and using the bodhrán in companies to do a community building and team building work, and working with children as well. So that's very important. That's something that wouldn't have been around a couple of years ago, and I think that's going to increase as well. Right, that's me through the presentation. If you want to dig into more details, my website, yes, there is a shop, so it's shameless advertising here, bodhrán-info.com, but there's also sections about the history, a bit more of that, and production details. I I would like to thank Mihal. He had the idea of Craiceann, so without him we wouldn't be here. I would like to thank all the teachers and people that are teaching the drum here and all around the world, all the makers and players and students. I wouldn't be standing without here, and of course, if we talk about Craiceann, there's always also the people on the island. Thank you very much.
Will you take a few questions?
Yeah, sure. If there's any questions, fire away. Yeah.
Anybody ask a question there? Yeah? Somebody asked him a question, I gotta guess.
Where's he going now? Where are you going, Mihal?
He's gone.
Bye-bye, Mihal.
It's got to get something.
Always getting something. Right. Questions? Go on. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know how many students from Craiceann run the whole island?
That's a very good question. No, I have no idea, to be honest. But there were quite a few. If you think...
James?
James? The question was how many students of Craiceann won the whole island? Bodhrán, yeah. So there's quite a few. I'll get your point and we'll make a list. And also, of course, we had people teaching that then after that won the whole island.
Yeah.
And the World Bodhrán Championship and all these things. So yes, I think we don't want to reduce it to that, because you don't have to win the whole island to be a good player or you enjoy playing, but it's also something we could count.
It talks about the level.
It talks a level. Yeah. I
Where
agree.
you can get to.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Any further questions? Right.
Okay.
Okay. Oh no.
Now, I want to say a few words about him. I hope I can embarrass him if I can.
Please.
When the idea of Craiceann came up, it was all writing out letters and advertising in papers and all that sort of stuff. Two people came to me afterwards and said, we could help you out with this. One of them was a German vet, and the other was an Irish brewer. But the German efficiency, I think, got to the top. Absolutely. And we definitely wouldn't have the Craiceann we have now without their input. They became great friends. They met in Craiceann, became great friends, still great friends, and they're kind of going into a consultancy level now after this year, so you mightn't see David next or Rolf next year. But we have a new team in place and we're going to run it anyway. We're giving it a shot anymore. But you see, I want to just present something.
Ooh.
Because without him, Craiceann would not be what it is now. He's the absolute brain. Now, I don't know how many hours you have spent talking to Rolf.
Too many.
Thanks, sir.